cricket world. Now the room seems coming to...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 38 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, and with me as ever, it's the one and only.
Yes, Santoki here. And Mash, if you'd have told me a year ago we'd still be recording podcasts in a lockdown in England, I wouldn't have believed you. And if you probably told me we'd have the following guest on our podcast a year ago, I wouldn't have believed you. So, yeah, it's a big episode, Mash, as you said, if you want to give the introduction to the people.
Indeed. You see, when following West Indies cricket is like a sitcom. And when you follow West Indies cricket as deeply as we do, and obviously all the fans all around the world, everyone always says to us, are you going to get this player? Are you going to get that player? And there's so many legends, there's so many current players and so on and so forth. But I've always said that if you truly want to understand West Indies cricket, you have to speak to the people behind the scenes. And we've been honoured to have Johnny Grave on in the past. We've spoken to Chris Brabazon, coach and education manager, and we've always wanted to try and speak to as many people behind the scenes as possible in order to just understand more about Cricket West Indies, how cricket works in the region, and to give the fans around, not just in the Caribbean, but the diaspora around the world, a deeper understanding. I think sometimes, Santoki, as West Indian fans, all we know how to do is cuss without actually working, without actually bothering to find out what's going on and if our cussing is valid or not. So I'm honoured, and we're honoured, I should say, as a podcast, to have the president of Cricket West Indies with us today, Ricky Skerritt. Some of you won't even know that this is what we were going to do, but we've managed to get Ricky and get some of his time ahead of the big election that's taking place in the next month or so. But Ricky, how are you? Are you there?
I'm here, and I'm doing well, thank you. I like that thing about cuss first and ask questions later. It's like shoot first and ask questions later. Those were the old Western cowboy mantra, you know. So West Indian fans are like that. We cuss first and then we ask questions later most of the time.
Indeed, and I think it would be remiss of us. Everyone who knows that we were going to do this episode, I said, and Santoki, we spoke and we said we're going to be as honest as we can be. And Ricky, I know before we started, you said you're going to speak purely from the heart and you're going to be as honest as you can be as well about everything that goes on with West Indies cricket. And ultimately, this episode is about helping everyone just understand how Cricket West Indies works and essentially the future for Cricket West Indies and West Indian cricket in general. But Ricky, before we get into all that, before we break it all down and before we go into the whys and the wheres and the thises and that, I've got a big question, and probably it's the most important question of all, because we sometimes take for granted that we know people, but we don't actually know. So this is an open-ended question, but who is Ricky Skerritt? In your own words, who is Ricky Skerritt?
Well, clearly in this context, a cricket lover, a long-standing fan of cricket, but of Cricket West Indies. As like many teenagers, I wanted to play cricket for the West Indies. When I was a teenager, I played for the Leeward Islands on the 19, and then, you know, those were the days when you had to go off and get an education if you're going to make anything of yourself. It was really, you had to be an exceptional talent. And coming from a tiny little island, it was virtually impossible to move up the ladder in cricket. So, you know, I went off. But I never stopped loving cricket. When I got back from university, you know, I played a little cricket in university. I got involved in cricket administration as a young age in the Leeward Islands, and managed the Leewards on the 19 team, having been a captain not so long before. And then I was invited by West Indies Cricket Board to manage the West Indies on the 19 team back in 1985. And then I managed the Leewards team. One of the great memories of my life was managing the Leewards team with Sir Viv Richards as captain. Of course, I'm younger than he is. Compared to him, I'm a little boy when it comes to cricket, but it was a great privilege for me to manage a team with Sir Viv Richards, Sir Richie Richardson now he's known as, and Cutley Ambrose and Kenny Benjamin and so on. And those were the guys who I went around the region with, and we beat everybody. That was in 1990. You could do your homework. Those days we didn't have a coach. I was the manager, coach, everything, bottle washer, chief cook and bottle washer. Those were the days when you allowed one person to accompany the team, and I was it. So I've always been able to mix cricket with administration, and I have a pretty good understanding of cricket, but I never tried to be a cricket expert when there are people with greater expertise around me. I believe strongly in giving past players an opportunity to lead in the cricket side of administration. So I've always respected cricketers. I've been in the trenches, I've been on the field. And then, of course, I became more known when I became the first ever full-time manager of the West Indies team in 2000. And I did that for 4 years. But that was really, I think, my first introduction to confusion in West Indies cricket, to the backroom ills of West Indies cricket. And it was not easy being out on the front line without the support systems that you need on the back line. And so my dream since then was to contribute in whichever way I could to help those on the front line be better prepared, better suited for the global hostility that they face out there in the world. It's not easy. And so I've always been a little bit more empathetic for players. And I think it's a plus because it's there all the time, but there are others who believe it's a weakness. I get my present opponents believe that I'm too player-centric, I'm too soft on players, etc., etc. But that is a matter of ignorance and partly of mischief. But cricket is about cricketers and about support systems that help put cricketers on the field to perform at their best. My job right now is to be part of that support system in a fairly significant leadership way.
Thank you, Ricky. And to be honest, I feel like that's barely touched the surface in terms of all the things you've done, because I'm going to jump then. So 2004, just fill in the gaps for people. So after 2004, when you're no longer team manager, what happens next? I mean, I know, but I'm just wanting you to fill the gaps in.
Well, I'm from a little country called St. Kitts and Nevis. And my prime minister at the time asked me to join him in a mission to turn St. Kitts into an international sporting venue and to attract the 2007 Cricket World Cup to St. Kitts in terms of a practice venue. And so when I looked at what was available, what was going to be available, what was the thinking at the time, I said, hey, let's be a venue. We don't have to be a practice venue. Let's be an international cricket venue. And we set about, we saw a field, and we were the only country in the Caribbean that put down a stadium specifically and hosted a group stage. We had one or two other, a lot of facilities were improved and some rebuilt and so on. But in terms of a brand new facility that was hosting World Cup group stage, that was St. Kitts. And so I was the guy behind that with, supporting what my prime minister wanted. And so we then spent some time doing some exciting things together in St. Kitts and Nevis from a tourism and sports and cultural perspective. I held several portfolios in government over a period of a little over 10 years until my party lost elections in 2015. And I then went into a private consultant business. And by that time, there was an effort to try to improve the quality of the CWI board, and CARICOM had suggested that I would be one person that they could put on the board as an independent director. So I was an independent director at the time that I made the decision to contest the presidency in collaboration with others from territorial boards who felt that there were some things that needed to change.
I'm glad that you've ended with that, because that's exactly where I was going next. So 2019 was a seismic year in West Indies cricket. Dave Cameron had been president of Cricket West Indies for 6 years. You and Kishore Shallow went up against him and the incumbent VC. What made you think you were the right person? Was there any apprehension? Did you ever feel that? In fact, no. Let me leave it at that. What made you think that was the time, and what made you think you were the person to go for it, or challenge him, I should say?
What was more important was the timing. I was at a stage of near retirement. I had very little to prove to anybody. I was fairly stable in my own personal life with my family, my finances, and so on. And I was really looking to see, how can I continue? Basically, I was at a point where I could not continue as an independent director and continue to have this ongoing internal battle with my predecessor over what was clearly issues that needed to be tackled in a more substantial way. And I think there were some members of the board who saw that I was a possible alternative because of the fight that I was leading internally to try to bring about change that was needed, but from inside. The obstacles were tremendous on the inside, and being just an independent individual director without having a board behind me and all that, it was almost a losing cause. And then a couple of the presidents from some of the boards approached me and said, we've been listening to you. We think that there are possibilities for improvement, and it's not going to happen under this gentleman. And I think that you should consider. And so that approach was made to me. And then we looked around to see who could accompany me, and we chose the brightest young man on the board, Dr. Shallow. And we felt it would be a good combination between the two of us, very compatible, very complementary in what we bring to the table. And we felt that we could, with the support of at least some of the territorial boards, set about to bring about the change that was needed.
Indeed, and a change did indeed come. Some saw it as a huge surprise at the time. I won't reveal my hand, but some saw it a huge surprise at the time. But you pulled off the victory, and we're now 2021, Santoki. 2 years later, I'm going to hand over to you to take this next part.
Yeah, so 2 years on, 2021, elections are coming up again. Obviously, you're standing for re-election. I think, firstly, from my perspective and a lot of people's perspectives, it's unusual that the term is only 2 years, because for any administration to implement substantial change with a 2-year period, you're always going to face an uphill battle, especially when one of those years is hit by an unprecedented global pandemic to sort of dismantle things. So I guess to keep it positive, what would you highlight as key achievements under your presidency so far within these 2 years?
Well, let me say, first of all, it has been a very, very busy 2 years. We have implemented a number of new policy initiatives, and we've had some successful outcomes in spite of the challenges. So let me just say that. But you're right. We have proposed that a term should be 3 years, not 2. That's part of the governance change that we are hoping can happen down the road. And we also propose in term limits in terms of 2 3-year terms for president and vice president, because we feel strongly that there needs to be fresh blood, fresh thinking, fresh people certainly coming through without people holding on to power indefinitely. But in terms of achievements, there have been a few, but I'd say that for me, the one that has been most dear to my heart has been to bring back the respect and the understanding of what drives players in the region, and why, even though many of them are not as mature as you would like them to be, I tell people all the time, they're not university graduates with PhDs, but they get a PhD on the cricket field and in the cricket dressing rooms, and they have their own expert understanding of what's required for success. And if they trust the people around them, and if they've developed the right relationships with their support system, whether it's their own private families or it's preferably qualified, paid professionals put in place to make life really substantive for them, not for the support system, for them. They will perform at their best more often. And that's really what the objective is. And I believe that we've created the environment where our players will perform at their best more often. Now, that is yet to be proven. That doesn't happen overnight. It was never going to be a quick fix. But I could tell you that the repair work has started. The other thing is our general transparency, our openness, our accountability has gone up several notches. We are engaging with stakeholders of all types. We're communicating better with fans. The media has more access to us than ever before, including to the executive team. You mentioned Johnny, Jimmy, Phil Simmons, Roger Harper, all the guys who and gals, because Ann Brown, they're all available. You know, there's more access to information from Cricket West Indies than ever in history. And that is not happening by accident, by the way. So I would say those are two of the ones that were dearest to my heart.
With regards to, I just want to throw in some of the aspects there that you've mentioned, but in particular, actually, you and the team around you implemented a series of task force reviews. So we had a selection system review, a governance review, there's been financial audits, etc. Looking back at those particular reviews, where do you see those? Where do you see those in the kind of grand scheme of Cricket West Indies right now? So 2 years down the line, you've had those reviews take place. Do you think you've got them? So the selection system one, for example, well, we have that in place. So do you think that all the reviews have been worthwhile? Do you think you've got them where you need them to be? Or is there still some work to be done? Particularly, I guess, when I say this, I'm thinking more with regards to the Webby governance review and how you might want to take that forward.
Well, let's take them one at a time. First of all, the style of bringing experts together in the form of a task force is something that I did very successfully when I went into government, because it doesn't always come across the right way when somebody walks into an organization and says, look, I have all the answers, you know, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. By the way, you know, you do it because I say you do it. That is a style that can get you into trouble. Even though you're doing the right things, people don't buy in and so on. But when you get a group of experts, not only do you widen the input and you make it, you know, more credible, because, you know, it takes a village. Cricket is, we love cricket as a sport, but there's so many moving parts and there's so many different stakeholders that cricket is not easy to get a perfect answer. You know, that's why when we see some of the great innings, we say, oh my goodness, this is about as perfect as batting can get and so on, because we're always looking for perfection. But you don't get it very often or very easily. So when you bring a group of people together, you try to make a mix of people who can bring a greater sense of understanding and perspective to the issue. The first one that I sort of stumbled upon was the state of our finances and the kinds of demands that were popping up. Every day there was a new demand to pay some outstanding payable. And the whole system of how do you decide on procurement and how do you account for procurement in terms of its value and its return on investment and so on. Those were issues that were just jumping out of the woodwork. And so that's why fairly quickly we engaged with an accounting firm and said, could you please come and take a look? Because we are not happy with what is sort of churning out. And there's too much uncertainty here and I need to get some experts. So that was called the Business Situation Assessment and Financial Review. That was done by a professional firm, accounting firm. It was not a forensic audit, as has been suggested, but it brought out a lot of very useful information. And by December in our first year, so within 9 months, we had a document which listed some 28 recommendations and put the whole picture in perspective for us in terms of where we should be going, including an assessment of a bond that my predecessor had supposedly almost put in place for the organization of in excess of $30 million to basically borrow in excess of $30 million in one swoop out of the private sector in Jamaica. Moving on from that, we always knew, in fact, that took longer to do, obviously, than the selection system review. The selection system review was something that we predicted that we would have to do and that we would do. The financial review was not something that we had predicted that we would do because we didn't understand as we were campaigning and so that was going to happen the way it did. Even as an independent director who went to at most 4 meetings a year, the true state of finances it was not quite as clear as it began to come to me once I became president. And I discovered that, of course, that even some of the financial employees were worried about certain things, but had not been speaking about them. But the selection system review was a big issue. There was a perception, I use the word perception, that all was not right, that all was not fair, all was not clear. There was no transparency, there was conspiracy, there was collusion, there was insularity, there was a lot of mistrust, and most importantly, there were players who had been put out of the system unjustly. Some of those players had complained to me personally, and even then I didn't understand how serious they were, that they felt that they had been banned from ever playing for West Indies again without any disciplinary due process. So they were being disciplined without having ever been charged of a disciplinary problem. That was the perception. And so we felt that that was something that needed looking into. That was something that had to get some drastic attention. And so it did. Now, what has it churned out? It churned out the first, we didn't even realize that there was no written selection policy. That selection policy was sort of a make up as you go and more by tradition and practice rather than by strategic outlook. And so, there was a lot of inconsistency and a lot of erratic type thinking, and depending on who became selectors, the whole thing changed and so on. And clearly, there was significant risk of interference in a system like that. And so what we have is 1 year, a little over a year of the output. And it involves a few things that are different, including talent scout, a lady chair of the women's team selection, a lead selector who has very clear criteria, including fitness criteria before him to administer, and or at least to consider in his selections, and a lot more data and analytics. In fact, we have a data and analytics expert whose job it is to feed the selection system. So, you know, and of course, the criteria are solidly published so that they're available. It hasn't worked perfectly because the public hasn't always been communicated with as clearly as we would like on the issue of fitness. For instance, one of the issues that the public doesn't understand, and is not easy for anybody who is non-medical to understand, is that there are some medical exemptions to some specific minimum standards. I'm not an expert on that, but it really says that there are some players who get exempted from that particular standard of the minimum fitness test because of some medical or biological, surgical issue from before, and there are other ways that are being used to test their relative fitness. That's all I can say on that. But basically, we are very pleased with the outcomes of that task force, which included past players and was chaired by our vice president. We have a lot of discussion that takes place internally that includes selectors. Now, selectors used to sort of, you know, it was inconsistent how much the selectors were included in strategic planning of the teams. You know, the coach, the head coach is always a selector. The captain is never a selector in this system, but consultation takes place with all and sundry. The inputs, nobody is territorial about the inputs anymore, and everybody has the entitlement to an opinion, but ultimately the lead selector and his team have our trust. They have our trust, and hopefully they're building now the trust of the players. They call all of the players individually to determine what is their state of readiness for selection before they announce them as a selectee. So Roger Harper is busier than most other executives in the region, communicating directly with players and letting them know what his particular outlook and his team's outlook is on their performance, past, present, and future. And that really is a system that, if we keep working at it, is going to be near perfect in the not too distant future. The third task force of the Webby task force, that is the most recent one. Let me not forget that. That one is more specific to board-related governance. Let me just say that the financial assessment one did speak to a lot of governance issues as well. And the 28 recommendations include several that speak to restructuring and reorganizing and improving and so on, all the elements of what governance reform would do. The Webby report came in August. It's a very well-written report. It was done by some people who are not just experts in their own field, but they are all cricket lovers. Most of them either played cricket or have been involved in cricket in one form or another. So we see no reason to believe that this is some ulterior motive to destroy cricket, contrary to what some people are saying. The Webby report had not done, because of the COVID and so on, had not done a tremendous amount of consultation. And the board felt, after feedback from several stakeholders, that we needed to ventilate the report some more, just spread it around, get more people to feedback, and it's going through that process. 4 boards have already given their feedback on it. We've had a fan survey done online with over 1,000 responses, and there's a committee chaired, a group, a working group, we call it, chaired by Mike Finley, former West Indies wicketkeeper and former captain of the Windward Islands and Combined Islands, by the way. He's an independent director, and Mike Finley is chairing that group. And unfortunately, there are two boards who have not yet presented their thinking on the Webby report. Hopefully, that will happen sooner or later. Those two boards, Barbados and Guyana, surprise, surprise. And those, once Mike Finley and his group are finished with their consultation and they put a report to the board will then have a session that is specific to the Webby report and then make certain decisions as to the way forward. But it's still very much in course right now. And I've been asked questions about when can I expect this review to be completed and so on. Well, you know, all that I'm not in a position to predict myself, because this is about the whole system. This is about the territorial boards. The territorial boards, I believe most of them understand that, you know, it cannot be business as usual, that we need to seek improvement, but, you know, and that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. The Webby report is to make sure that we move forward and improve the way we govern West Indies cricket. It's not a threat to anybody. It's not designed to upset administrators. And Webby and his team have been very open for consultation, and that's exactly what's taking place right now.
Santel, before I hand over to you, just want to go one thing on there, Ricky, because I'm not trying to pretend that I'm any West Indies guru, but I look back over previous reports that were submitted to Cricket West Indies, whether it be the Patterson report, the Lucky report, the so on and so forth. And whilst they may differ in that they may not be covering all the aspects that the Webby report is covering, do you understand why some would have apprehension about whether the report will be kicked into the long grass? Now, I say that, sorry, I'll just finish off. I say that because how much can you insist on this? So you may have the best intention in the world, and as president, you'd be like, this is what we need to do. I got in on this mandate. We need to have some kind of change. But I guess why I'm asking is, can it happen, or do you suspect that you will face some level of difficulty, assuming you are re-elected?
Let's agree that there are a lot of people who don't want change in the way the boards put together and the way they operate. And that there are a lot of people who fear the change in terms of how it will affect them as individuals. The difference is that I am not a flag waver for that type of outlook. My predecessor was. My predecessor fanned the flames of discord and acrimony between Cricket West Indies and stakeholders. The issue of Cricket West Indies being a public concern, some people see that as an economic term and use it as a political football. I see it as a genuine description of what West Indies cricket is. West Indies cricket is commercially the responsibility of the territorial boards and the central CWI organization. But West Indies cricket, whether they like to hear it from me or not, is owned by all of the people, past, present, and future, who have any kind of West Indianism in them. And so that is the main difference that I bring, because I genuinely believe that. And I may live and die by that, because there are people out there who don't like to hear that, because they are so caught up with their own sense of importance and their own commercial concerns. So when a task force comes forward and says, look, guys, you all have to do a better job of relating to the stakeholders and accounting to the people for your tenure, and being more transparent with the way in which you treat players and other assets of Cricket West Indies. that's a potential conflict between those who don't believe cricket is a public concern and those who believe and trust and think and live it as if it is part and parcel of West Indianism, which is me and my vice president. So philosophically, there is a conflict. The difference today is that I understand why there's a conflict, and I try to bring peace and understanding wherever there is misunderstanding and war. And so it takes a while, but slowly but surely, those who oppose some of the recommendations are beginning to see that there are some recommendations that they can embrace, and that is not all or nothing. You know, my predecessor and his team were an all or nothing people. It was, you know, to heck with them. It can't be to heck with them because it takes a village. You cannot survive cricket without governments, businesses, fans, media, etc. being part of what is good about cricket. If not, cricket will die. So will the Webby report prevail? It may not prevail in exactly the form that it is in as written, but the concept of looking for improvement in the way we operate and put our boards of directors together must be a concern for all. And we will continue to debate and discuss until we get to some degree of compromise and we move forward. This will not become a political nightmare for this board or for the governments or for you in the media or for anybody else. It may not get addressed as quickly as some people would like it to be addressed. But I guarantee you that as long as I have anything to do with it, it will make some progress going forward. And it won't be long before you hear of some fundamental changes that would be agreed by the members when they get together and they decide what is best for the organization going forward.
I'm just gonna take it back a bit there. You mentioned previously about building up player trust through transparency, and obviously in recent times we've seen Dwayne Bravo reverse his international retirement to come back to West Indies, Kieran Pollard committing to West Indies by becoming captain of the white ball sides, and most importantly, I guess, Phil Simmons returning as head coach despite having sued the previous administration for unfair dismissal. Now, it would be understandable that all three of these players and staff would have distrust of West Indian administration due to what's happened to them in the past. How difficult did you find it to convince them that things were going to change under your presidency?
Well, it was pretty easy because we believed in what we were saying. We really believed that the best players were not being made available, not only because of their actions, but because of administrative errors and because of attitudes that were not conducive to bringing people together. I mean, Phil Simmons got fired while I was in the board. The record will show that there were 2 or 3 of us who fought vehemently against the dismissal, because we knew he was being set up by some people mischievously and maliciously. But obviously, when you're part of a board and a board makes a majority decision, you have to, be careful. So bringing back Phil Simmons was not just about undoing ill-done tasks. It was about recruiting the best West Indian coach available. And that was one of the promises, that we would hire the best available West Indians first and foremost. And where the best West Indians were not available, we will then look for the best whoever, wherever. So Phil Simmons went through a process and was rehired as the best available candidate. It wasn't because we were sorry for him or we were apologetic to him. Phil Simmons is there on a commercial arrangement. If Phil Simmons doesn't perform, Phil Simmons will not last. But it will be done in a way that will not breed discord. It will hopefully continue till the natural output, and that is he will bring improvement to West Indies cricket, as we know he's capable of, and as he has shown before. Now, in terms of Pollard, remember, the task force, the selection task force, also was asked to make some comments and some recommendations about captaincy, specific to white ball cricket, where you know, we were in a rapid decline, which nobody could understand. In 2016, we won the T20 World Cup. We were ranked number 3 in the world then. By the time we came into office in 2019, we were ranked at number 10. We are right now ranked at number 10. We just beat the number 7 ranked team. And, you know, that's an anomaly. How does that happen? It's because of what was taking place. And it also it limited the people that were available to be captain and so on. So the recommendation from the committee that we should use one captain, the recommendation didn't say use Pollard. It said use one captain for both white ball formats. And by the way, we think from what we have researched that Pollard is the right man for that, because you needed somebody who could handle and lead both the T20 format and the ODI format. At the time, Carlos Brathwaite was leading the T20 format, but was hardly getting even looked at for the ODI team. And Jason Holder was leading the ODI team and hardly getting looked at for the T20 team. So it became easy to look for the right player that could handle both. I personally did 3 interviews with Pollard before I even gave the process of the final recruitment my blessing. The recommendation of Pollard as the white ball captain came after several discussions, one of which was a sit-down formal interview with Pollard. And in each meeting, Pollard emphasized what his love was of West Indies cricket and what his vision was for West Indies cricket. And in listening to Pollard, I was fascinated because the picture that had been painted of him and his lack of commitment and so on. And when we were announcing Pollard as captain and we had the press conference put together, Dwayne Bravo showed up, and Dwayne Bravo came and sat in the audience and gave a standing ovation to Pollard, and came afterwards to me and said, Mr. President, whatever I can do, just let me know. And I said, you can do best if you will perform so that the selectors will be impressed, because the Caribbean needs you out on the field. You're not ready to go off the field yet. And that has been the attitude. I don't dictate anything to selectors, except all players who are available and appropriate for selection should be considered. That's it.
Can't be any more can't be any more clear. Can't be any more clear than that. Looking at, and again, it's kind of hard because obviously you've had the 2 years. We know what's coming up, but I'm intrigued to see how you're going to answer this one, Ricky. What have been your biggest obstacles in the 2 years? Now, I'm taking the pandemic out of it because I think for all listeners, everybody knows the obstacles a pandemic would pose because we're all living through one, and we can all see Cricket West Indies surely isn't an anomaly when it comes to the economic hardship that the pandemic would have posed. Obviously, the players and staff had to go through a 50% pay cut last year. But if we put that to one side, what have you seen as what have you faced, I should say, as your biggest challenges in office? And part of me says that because I look at, since your opponents have come out to say that they're challenging you for 2021, I look at some of the rhetoric that has been going around in the last few weeks, and and I'm trying to be completely down the line here, so I'm not being pro you, I'm not being pro Sanasi, whatever it might be. Looking purely down the line, I look at some of the rhetoric that's coming out, and I think to myself, but these people are on a board with you. So based on that, what challenges have you faced then whilst trying to do your job?
Look, this is a very delicate subject because, as you said, we all on a board together. One of the things I've had to do was to facilitate inputs from all and sundry, because that is my philosophy. And one has to listen and stomach even the most horrendous inputs if you're going to truly believe in people's rights and opportunities to be heard. But what bothers me most is the mindset of some board members and others who make opinions based more on who and where rather than on what and why. And so, for instance, you go to you take a matter forward, and you know before you even start that there's going to be opposition and resistance, regardless of the content and the composition, because it's coming from you. And so the two biggest enemies of West Indies cricket historically, other than science and technology and access to it and so on for preparation, that's a different story, have been insularity and petty boardroom politics. Those two points of disruption continue to rear their heads in West Indies cricket too much. The chats and the radio talk show programs and all that is where that should take place. I don't have a problem with people fighting over politics and so on. I try my best to minimize the politics that affects Cricket West Indies. That's one of the fights, the battles that I wage against. I tell people all the time, when I became president, it occurred to me that we were about 80% politics and 20% cricket at Cricket West Indies. And I've been trying my best to flip that to the exact opposite, to the inverse of 80% cricket and 20% politics. But I understand that there will always be politics, especially like now when elections are coming up. And what bothers me about elections is not that there are people challenging. I mean, that is healthy. I welcome. I mean, you know the background in what's happening in Guyana right now. I don't even comment on that, because there are people who feel that I'm going to somehow stop the election by claiming that Sanasi is illegitimate and all that. I have said openly all the time, whatever is happening in Guyana, I'm keeping a close watch on it, as I've done for the last 2 years. We hope that Guyana cricket will sort itself out, and that Guyana cricket will benefit from the changes and the decisions that are made. And we are concerned about the future of Guyana cricket, but I'm not letting it affect how we conduct the Cricket West Indies election. So it's not about who. What bothers me is about what. What is it that these folks are planning to bring to cricket that we can trust, first of all, that they will bring, and that they will in fact bring betterment to cricket, because the track record doesn't show it. The track record does not show that there is a genuine, authentic concern about the future of West Indies cricket, more so than of the future of individual needs. This is not, I tell people, this is not about me. This is not about Kishore Shallow. This is about a phenomenon that's bigger than any of us. It's called West Indies cricket. And we have to do all we can to protect West Indies cricket from the negatives and the nastiness and the hatred and the petty politics and insularity that has plagued it for so long. It's not going to be a perfect score. As I said, we will always have struggles, But if we all understand that ultimately it's about betterment of West Indies cricket, I think that we'll be able to have people come and go, and West Indies cricket will get stronger and stronger.
Ricky, before Santoki, I'm going to come to you, but one last thing from me, Ricky. So I think I was on TVJ the other day, and in the midst of that interview, one of the things that was brought up, which I thought was actually quite pertinent, and I'm going to tell you the answer I gave and then put it back to you. But one of the things I find weird about running Cricket West Indies, and I'm not in your position, but just something I've always found weird about it, is what happens on the field determines how somebody views an administration.
Exactly.
But that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So if I ever am on, like, whether it be a social media group, so if we had, in fact, actually, the Bangladesh series is a perfect example. Lose the ODI series, everybody cuss the administration. Win the Test series, the administration did a good job. Now, I don't know if West Indies.
I don't mean to cut you. It's a sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't story. But the point is, if your team in at least one of the three formats and in at least two of the genders, male or female, is not showing improvement, it's constantly at the bottom of the ladder, it's not beginning to climb the ladder again, then something is wrong. And just an exciting victory from time to time is not enough. For an administration to feel that its role is relevant and its inputs bring in return on investment, you must begin over time to see a more quality performance on the field. And you must at least begin to see players giving of their best and working to improve. Having mediocrity live through the team on an ongoing basis clearly is wrong. So, do you judge a president by the results on the field? Ultimately, yes, but not necessarily overnight. That president has to explain to the people who put him in office what he is doing to bring a sense of hope and opportunity for increasing and improving performance. You mentioned some of the executive staff earlier when we started. There must be an alignment between the board, which is non-executive, and the executives, strategically and otherwise. There must be an alignment between the cricket people and the non-cricket people in terms of what are the priorities. Where we spend money must make sense to ultimately what we are doing with it to help improve performance. So it's not either or. It takes a village, and that village involves the external stakeholders and the internal executives and non-executive leaders. And ultimately, firing a coach when a team doesn't do what you think it should do and doing knee-jerk type responses is not the answer. And unfortunately, that's what we have done for too many years. And I've said we are going to stop that. It's about learning from your losses and your failures and then showing what you're doing to make sure that you are getting better. And that's the big difference now. We are going to get better and better because we have more and more systems in place to help the people on the field and those supporting the people on the field get better and be at their best more often. So I have no problem if after 3 or 4 years, the team is embarrassing the region, that somebody says, boy, sorry, we got to try something else. And I say, thank you very much, I'm gone. But I don't think that you can judge somebody after 1 or 2 years. And it's not about me, it's about the system that I helped to inculcate and to generate.
Can't get more comprehensive than that, Santoki.
Yeah, Mash, I mean, before you come in with the final questions, I guess one thing which a lot of our followers on social media all wanted us to ask, Ricky, was, do you think that West Indies women play enough cricket at regional and international level at the moment? And is there any plans for a sort of CPL tournament for women's cricket in the West Indies?
You know, the short answer is no. We need, it's one of the biggest needs in our cricket right now. We just had possibly the best 3-week camp that the women have ever had. And that's the feedback I'm getting. And I'm not being political here. I'm telling you what, get Courtney Walsh on this program when you can and ask him about what happened.
Tell him to come on, please.
3 weeks. He will come on your program. He's part of his job requirement. They have to be open to the media. So just set it up through our media people, and they'll see. But my point is, so they have gone home now after a really exciting tune-up, and including some young players. And then what are they going to do? There's no tournament. There's very little cricket across the region. So what have we done? We've set up a network of coaches across the region. When the coaches were there, Brabazan would have told you some of the things he's doing. But Brabazan is coordinating this high-performance coaching education system so that there will be coaches ready and available to the players wherever they live. And the players then have no excuse for not at least doing some work on their own. And if the territorial boards do what they said that they would do and continue to help the way they should be helping, then the facilities, and if the governments that own the facilities are partners as they should be, then there'll be more support systems locally. And the regional tournaments and then the regional camps and the international tours will then all fall into place. But at the moment, COVID, funding, women's cricket in general is because of the postponement of the Women's World Cup. We were supposed to be playing qualifiers within the next month or so. That's why we had that camp ready, because the next step would have been to go for some qualifiers. I think it's in Sri Lanka, I'm not sure. But the point is that I've taken a long time to say, no, there's not enough women's cricket being played, especially teenagers. We really have to get, right now, for instance, the Leeward Islands, in collaboration with Cricket West Indies, is putting on an under-19 drive in 3 islands, Nevis, St. Kitts, and Antigua, because the Leeward Islands could not even produce an under-19 girls team when we had the under-19 tournament for the first time in 2019 in Trinidad. They were the only territorial board that could not field an under-19 team. And so we have to be looking for the teenagers and the teenage girls, of which there are many gifted ones across the region who are playing other sports, not enough cricket.
Santoki, were you going to raise another question, or was that the main one you were going to go for?
That was the main one, yeah.
In that case, I'm throwing you one more, Ricky, and we are coming to an end. So I had written down in my notes, and you don't have to talk about this. I'm only using this as an example. I had written down in my notes, decentralized high performance systems, which I think was part of your original 10-point plan. I think it's something that you want to focus on going forward should you be re-elected. But money notwithstanding, and after 2 years in the role, if you had the money of a BCCI or an ECB or a Cricket Australia, what would be the first thing you would target to spend the money on that you think would have maybe immediate's the wrong word, but you think would have immediate returns or immediate improvement for West Indies cricket?
I think you've already answered it. A significant academy in control of every territorial board, with the central hub of the Coolidge Cricket Ground, CCG, serving the needs of those academies and strengthen the network for not just high performance input, but for all levels of cricket education, but especially for high performance science and technology based inputs with the best coaches working in all of those places. The coaches don't go onto the field themselves, but the coaches help to produce knowledgeable, brave, confident, competitive players who understand what they're trying to do and who read what they need to do when they're down there and handle difficulties without throwing in the towel and running back up to the pavilion. That kind of attention to preparation from a very young age needs that infrastructure. We are going to achieve that. We're doing it more slowly and more sparingly than we would like. But we have completed the purchase of CCG just less than a year ago, just around a year ago, actually. I would say we probably paid the last check somewhere around the middle of March a year ago. And so now that we own CCG in collaboration with the Antigua and Barbuda government, we have an opportunity now to put our plans in action. We've been building out the human infrastructure. That's where Brabazon comes in. That's where Graham West now comes in. Graham West has been with Cricket West Indies for 7 years. He now finally has the right title, which is High Performance Manager. And he reports to Jimmy Adams, who is our Director of Cricket. We have a head of women's cricket, Courtney Walsh. We now have a head of the under-19 Rising Stars cricket, which is Floyd Reefer. We have a number of key people, along with the head coaches of the various teams and the selectors, who network regularly. They have the data analytics software, the athlete management system that we have is being fully used now, and coaches are communicating with each other. And that is the revolution that's taking place. And nearly all of the coaches are West Indians. We have educated nearly 400 coaches just in the first year. Okay, at the foundation course, which is mostly like teachers and family members, and so people to introduce kids to cricket, the kiddies cricket type level training. We've had over 200 of those trained. Over 80 of them are women. And this is a quiet revolution that's taken place, led by Chris Brabazon, that most people don't know enough about. But that, in our next term, we hope to expand that to over 1,000 coaches. And that in itself is going to make a major impact down the road.
Well, Ricky, I mean, this could have been like a 10-part series, but we're gonna have to settle. We're gonna have to settle for our 1 hour special with you. But before we wrap it up and before you go, Santoki, I'm actually going to let you do the honors. And the thing is, Ricky, before you answer this question, actually, no, you can. Well, boy, I don't even know if you want to answer it. You know, Santoki, I'll let you introduce the questions.
Yeah, so this is something we ask anyone who comes onto the pod, regardless of who they are. Speaking as a fan, I guess, as a fan, take off your administrator cap. As a fan, where would you list the best venue in the Caribbean to watch cricket for atmosphere?
Be very careful.
Yeah,
and you
look, you guys want to get me slaughtered here.
No insularity in your answer.
But you know why it's a good question? Because I started off by telling you that I'm first and foremost a fan. Because I have traveled to look at cricket. You know, a lot of people who really love cricket know me because we have been in the back of the stand, by the bar, etc., all over, from Kingstown, St. Vincent, to Charlotte Amalie, St. Thomas. I mean, I have looked at cricket in St. Martin, in Anguilla, in places that you guys probably didn't even remember had a cricket ground. But if you were looking at international first-class cricket, okay, or let's say international cricket, my best days were at the ARG in Antigua, in the days when the Antigua Recreation Ground was an international venue. I mean, it hasn't been a venue now for, I don't know, 15 years or more. But there was never a greater fun outing than going to the ARG, especially when Viv Richards was at the wicket, beating ball. Since that time, and during that time, the only other stadium that I have looked at cricket with the same level of atmosphere and just pure fun and entertainment, and still be able to see the cricket was at Queen's Park Oval.
Mm.
So I would say that my best enjoyment of cricket as a fan, while I put the proviso that I have looked at cricket all across the region and I've had wonderful vibes, great days, but every time I went to the Antigua Recreation Ground and every time I went to Queen's Park Oval to see cricket, it was an absolute bomb. So, hey, am I gonna lose my presidency because I haven't mentioned the other cricket ground? I don't know. I hope not.
We're finishing with the last one, Santoka. We're going to end there.
No, actually, out of interest, then you've obviously worked in West Indies setup for a while, and you've been a fan all your life. Who's your personal favorite West Indian player of all time?
Well, I'm a little conflicted here, for obvious reasons. I mean, I've worked with so many of them. When I was manager of the West Indies team, every time we had a camp, with Roger Harper as our coach, we would bring. There were two players we always brought. The batting coach we brought was Gordon Greenwich. The bowling coach we brought was Andy Roberts. Those were two of my favorite all-time cricketers. I've known Viv Richards for many, many years. When I had the opportunity as Minister of Tourism, I was happy to invite Viv Richards to have honorary membership at our golf club in St. Kitts that's owned by the government. Recently, you saw that Viv Richards was honored in the new Botham Richards Trophy to replace the Wisdom Trophy. There have been many others. Sir Gary Sobers, oh my goodness. I got to know Sir Gary more on the golf course because he's a generation ahead of me. And then I got to meet Wes Hall when he was president of West Indies Cricket, and I got to know he and his family. I mean, these are just amazing people I've had. And then I became very close with Clive Lloyd just when I took over from him as manager of the team, and since. And they're just you can't pick one. Yeah. But the one that I have become closest to on a family, personal level is Brian Charles Lara. And what's special about Brian? Brian, I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the dressing room and in hotels with Brian. And Brian is a very special talent, and as they all are. And I had an opportunity to make an input and to help however I could in his needs. And I'm happy to say that Brian is godfather to my youngest daughter. And so there's a special bond between, he may not want me to say this publicly because nobody likes to be seen to be friendly with a president. That's what happens with players. But I'm very proud of Brian. I'm really proud of Brian with what he has achieved off the field since he left cricket. And my biggest wish is that players will be able to graduate into their post-cricket lives in all kinds of ways, including in cricket careers. I mean, we just had a little experiment with two ladies from our women's team in broadcast. We got mixed responses in some cases, but I think generally they did very, very well. And we've had, from what I gather, more positive feedback then. And it's their first attempt, But it's about helping cricketers in the Caribbean to see that there is a future for them in cricket, and that they don't have to do like what people like me and others did and choose academics over cricket. We encourage them to do both. But, you know, it's a small region. There's not a lot of space for a lot of people, but the best people will always find space. And we wish all cricketers can continue to grow and turn around and give back to cricket by helping youngsters, and not just by looking for jobs from Cricket West Indies. The best will get employed at Cricket West Indies to do specific specialty jobs, but all need to do whatever they can to help young cricketers wherever they are. If that is happening, then I can go to the great beyond with a big smile on my face.
And you know what? There's no better way to end this particular pod. I was thinking, how am I going to end it? But that last little piece there from you, Ricky, was perfect. If all give back in some shape or form, that's how West Indies cricket prospers. I wasn't joking when I said that I wish this was like part one of like you know, like on Netflix, where it's like a 10-part series. But we must talk again. We must talk again, Ricky, at some point. All the best with the upcoming elections. And thank you, ultimately, for sharing your time and your thoughts and your ideas, and giving the history and where Cricket West Indies currently is, where you want to take it, etc. We hope for anyone who's listened to this episode of the podcast that that's been as informative for you as it was for us. And at the time of recording, West Indies will begin their ODI series against Sri Lanka in about 48 hours. So we wish the team well on that as well. Ricky, absolute honor and pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. Santoki, any last words?
No, just a pleasure, Ricky, to come on the podcast. I personally found it so insightful, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
It's a pleasure. I'm happy to be here, and please keep up the good work and ask the hard questions. Get the right people on and grill them. That's what we need. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's been episode 38 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the